The taste of his blood is copper and ash on my tongue. Francis stumbles back, clutching the ruin of his throat, his eyes wide with a terror that feels like a long-delayed gift. The chaos of the challenge circle fades to a dull roar around me. My pack now, watches in stunned silence. Jack's gaze burns into my back, a mixture of horror and a dawning, terrible awe. I look down at my hands, no longer human, no longer simply wolf, but shimmering with a pale, celestial light that cuts through the forest gloom. The power they tried to bury with me in the cold earth now sings in my veins, a symphony of vengeance and rebirth. I am not the Omega they left to die. I am the storm. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with blood. It started with a scent, a lie, and the slow, chilling realization that the man I loved had signed my death warrant. The scent of another Omega was all over him. It clung to Jack's skin, a sweet, cloying perfume of jasmine and submission that made my own stomach twist. He stood in the doorway of our den, backlit by the moon, his broad shoulders tense. He didn't meet my eyes. "Council meeting ran late," he said, his voice a low rumble that once could soothe the wild fear in my soul. Now it just felt like noise. I stood by the cold fireplace, my arms wrapped around myself. Molly said the council adjourned at sundown. My voice was quieter than I intended. It always was around him now. "It's nearly midnight." A flicker of irritation crossed his perfect, sculpted face. "I had patrols to check. The border with the Silvermane pack is tense. You know this, Ellie." Ellie. My name in his mouth sounded like a reminder. A designation. The Omega, his. I inhaled slowly, the foreign Omega's scent filling my lungs, a poison. "Francis is the alpha heir. His concerns are valid." Jack finally looked at me, his alpha blue eyes glinting in the dim light. There was no warmth there, only a weary impatience. "He believes our pack is vulnerable. That our domestic situation." The unspoken words hung between us, heavier than stone. Our situation. Me, the barren Omega. 3 years of mating, 3 years of failed heats, 3 years of watching his hope curdle into resentment. The pack whispered. Francis, Jack's brother and the pack's head enforcer, shouted it. An Omega who cannot secure the Alpha's line is a dead weight. He strode into the room, the power of his presence pushing against me like a physical force. He stopped close, too close, and I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. His fingers brushed my chin, a gesture that was once tender, now an assessment. "Your heat is coming. I can smell it on the horizon." A spark, weak but stubborn, flared in my chest. Yes, this time will be different. It wasn't a hope. It was a command, an order to my body, to the universe. "Jack," I started, the words sticking in my throat. "What if it isn't? What then?" He didn't let me finish. His mouth came down on mine, a claiming kiss that tasted like duty and distant jasmine. It was nothing like the kisses we used to share, the ones that felt like falling into a warm, wild river. This was a stamp, a seal. When he pulled back, his eyes were already looking past me, toward the window, toward the borders, toward the problems an heir would solve. "Get some rest," he said, already turning away. "I need to review the patrol logs with Francis." He was gone before I could draw another breath, leaving me alone with the ghost of another woman's scent and the cold ashes in the hearth. The next week was a slow march toward the inevitable. My body thrummed with the gathering storm of my heat, a painful, feverish tide that made my senses razor-sharp and my emotions dangerously raw. The foreign Omega scent didn't return on Jack, but something else had taken its place. A cold distance, a clinical focus. He touched me only to he was an alpha preparing for a tactical operation, not a mate awaiting a union. The night the first true cramp seized my lower abdomen, Jack was out. "Border skirmish," Leo, his most loyal beta, told me with an apologetic grimace at the den's threshold. He was a kind man, with worry lines already etching his young face. Silvermane scouts. The Alpha and Francis had to lead the response, start without him. As if my heat was a meeting. I doubled over, pain lancing through me, and nodded, unable to speak. Leo hesitated, looking genuinely pained. Molly's coming. She'll sit with you. Molly, the pack's senior Omega and the closest thing I had to a friend, arrived with cool cloths and a basket of herbs. Her gentle, wrinkled hands on my forehead were a comfort. Hush now, child. It's fierce this time, isn't it? That's a good sign, a strong tide. Where is he, really? I gasped between waves of fire. Her hands stilled for a fraction of a second. The border is far, Ellie. These things take time. But her scent spiked with a thread of anxiety, sour and sharp. She was lying. I was too deep into the preheat hypersensitivity not to know it. The pain was blinding, but the dread that began to coil beneath it was worse. The hours blurred into a hellscape of fever and longing. The mate bond in my chest, that golden thread that had always connected me to Jack, felt thin and strained, vibrating with a strange, discordant energy. I called for him through it, a silent, desperate scream into the void. Only silent. It was in the deepest, most vulnerable trough of the fever, when the cramps had momentarily subsided into a dull, whole-body ache, that I heard the voices outside the den. Not Jack's. Francis's. Has to be done cleanly. The alliance with the Nightfall pack is contingent on it. Their Alpha's daughter is a fertile, powerful Omega. She's already agreed. My blood turned to ice. I held my breath, Jack's voice lower, harder to catch. My mate. She is a failure. Francis's voice was a venomous whip. 3 years, brother. The pack murmurs. They say your strength is waning, tied to a barren shadow. The Silvermane incident proved our weakness. We need the Nightfall Alliance to secure our territory. We need a strong heir. You know the law. An Omega who cannot produce an heir after 3 cycles can be set aside for the good of the pack. The silence that followed was longer and colder than the winter ground. She will not survive the rejection, Jack said, his voice utterly hollow. The bond is too deep. To sever it now in the midst of her heat. Precisely, Francis cut in, smooth as oiled steel. Her system is already under immense stress. A traumatic severance will be too much. Her heart will give out. It will be a tragedy, not an execution. The pack will mourn. You will be free. And in a respectable time, you will take Liana of Nightfall as your chosen mate, and our packs will be united. I stopped breathing. The world narrowed to the crack under the door, to the shadows of 2 men deciding my death. Do it at the peak, Francis pressed. When the bond pull is strongest, it will be quick. For her and for you. Another eternity of silence. Then one word. Jack's voice, stripped of all the love, all the warmth, all the promises. Empty. Agreed. The footsteps retreated. I lay paralyzed, the fever burning me up from the inside. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the shattering, silent explosion in my chest. The golden thread didn't just strain, it cracked. I felt it. A fissure of pure, desolate cold. Molly found me like that, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming soundlessly into my hair. She knew from my scent, from the utter devastation that must have been rolling off me. She rushed over, her old eyes wide with horror. Ellie, sweet girl, what is it? What did you hear? I turned my head slowly. My voice, when it came, was a dry, dead leaf scraping on stone. He's going to kill me, Molly. No, no, child, no. At the peak, he and Francis, they've made a deal. I told her what I'd heard, each word in agony. Her face crumpled. She didn't insult me by denying it. She knew the politics, the cruelty Francis was capable of. She knew Jack's growing obsession with strength and legacy. She gathered my limp hands in hers. We have to get you out, now. Where? A hysterical laugh bubbled in my throat. I'm in full heat. Every unmated male in 100 miles will catch my scent. I can't run. I can't fight. She hissed, her fear giving way to a fierce, protective anger. Listen to me, Ellie. There is a place. The old stone hollow deep in the blighted woods west of the territory. The earth there is dead. It masks scent. No one goes there. She meant it was a place to die. But you can hide there. The bond, when he severs it. You will survive, she insisted, her grip tightening. You are stronger than you know. There is a light in you, Ellie. I've always felt it. A quiet, deep thing. It's not just an Omega's spirit. It's something else. You must trust it. Now, come. We have little time. She helped me rise, my legs buckling. She wrapped me in a dark, scent-muffling cloak, and together like two ghosts, we slipped out the back of the den. The pack was quiet, most wolves either on patrol or asleep. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. We stumbled into the tree line, my heat fever warring with soul-crushing grief. We hadn't gone half a mile when a familiar, hated scent washed over us, pine and arrogance. Francis stepped out from behind a giant oak, Leo at his flank, looking miserable. Going for a midnight stroll, Omega? Francis sneered, his eyes glowing faintly amber in the dark. In your condition, how reckless. Molly shoved me behind her. Let her pass, Francis. By the old laws. She forfeited that protection when she became a threat to the pack's survival, Francis said calmly. Leo. Leo flinched but stepped forward, his shoulders hunched. I'm sorry, Ellie. Alpha's orders. Jack, I breathed, the last of my hope a dying ember. The Alpha, Francis confirmed with a vicious smile, has authorized your containment. This was it. Not even the dignity of a private execution. They'd drag me back, let Jack sever the bond in front of them all, and watch me die. The fissure in my chest widened, and through it, I felt not just cold, but a strange, gathering pressure. A hum. Molly launched herself at Francis with a shocking snarl. Run, Ellie, to the hollow, run. Francis backhanded her away. She hit a tree with a sickening crunch and slid down, motionless. A sound tore from my throat, not a scream, but a raw, guttural cry of loss and fury. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, my body screaming in protest. Let her run, it's more sport this way. Track her, Leo. Bring her to the clearing when the moon is highest. The Alpha awaits his duty. I ran. The world became a smear of shadows and pain. The bond in my chest was a live wire, fraying, spitting agony with every step. I could feel him through it now, Jack. A cold, hard resolve, a wall of impenetrable purpose. He was waiting. He was ready. I fell, tripping over a root, and sprawled onto the rocky, sour earth of the blighted woods. The trees here were skeletal, the air still and silent. The stone hollow was just ahead, a dark maw in the hillside. I crawled toward it, my strength gone. Inside, it was dark and damp. I curled into a ball against the cold stone, the tremors of my heat and my terror racking me. The peak was coming. I could feel it rising, a tsunami of biological imperative with no mate to answer it. And beneath that, the bond, stretched to its breaking point. I closed my eyes, thinking of Molly's still form, of Jack's empty agreement, of Francis's smile. The hum inside me grew louder, a resonance in my bones. It wasn't power. Not yet. It was a potential. A silent, screaming question. The peak hit. My body arched, a silent cry locked in my throat. And at that exact, agonizing moment, I felt it, a brutal surgical. The pain was beyond anything. It was the universe tearing in two. It was my soul being vacuumed out into nothingness. I convulsed on the stone floor, certain this was death, but I didn't die. The pain receded, leaving a vast, howling emptiness. And into that emptiness, the hum rushed. It wasn't warm. It was clear and bright and terrifying. It filled the cracks, not with light, but with a crystalline, singing energy. I felt it pool in my core, where the bond had been. Outside the hollow, I heard the soft crunch of a footfall on dead leaves. Leo's voice, thick with shame, whispered into the dark. "Ellie, I'm so sorry. It's time. The Alpha is here." I opened my eyes. In the absolute darkness of the stone hollow, I saw my own hands. They were faintly, unmistakably glowing. The golden light pulsed in my palms, a heartbeat of power where only agony and emptiness had been. Leo froze in the mouth of the hollow, his eyes wide, reflecting the unearthly glow. I didn't understand it. I only knew the bond was gone, a severed limb I could no longer feel, and yet I was alive. The thing in my hands hummed, warm and terrifying. "Ellie," Leo's voice was a hoarse whisper, all his enforcer's authority stripped away by shock. He took a cautious step inside, the scent of damp stone and dead earth mixing with his own confusion and fear. "What?" I had no answer. I curled my fingers and the light dimmed, retreating beneath my skin like a shy creature. A phantom ache throbbed in my chest where the mate bond had lived, but it was just an echo. The raw, mortal wound of its severing had been cauterized by this. "Jack ordered me to bring you to him," Leo said, but it sounded like a question. He didn't move closer. "To finish the job?" My own voice was scraped raw from screaming, but it didn't waver. "He severed the bond, Leo. He meant for me to die. Molly," the memory of her body hitting the forest floor, of Francis's cruel smile, surged up, and a spark of that golden light flickered at my fingertips. Leo flinched. "Molly's status is unknown. Francis reported she attacked him. He acted in defense of the Alpha's decree." A bitter laugh choked me. "Of course he did." I pushed myself up, my body feeling both frail and strangely new. The weakness from my heat was gone, burned away in the crisis. In its place was a hollow stamina, fueled by nothing I recognized. "So, are you taking me to my execution?" He hesitated, his jaw working. I saw the conflict I'd heard in his voice earlier, warring with a lifetime of obedience. He was a good beta, loyal to his alpha who had just murdered his mate in all but the final blow. "The Alpha must see this," Leo finally said, gesturing weakly to my hands. "This changes things." "Does it?" I asked, cold seeping into my bones. "Or does it just mean he'll have to use a silver knife instead of a broken heart? I'm not going back, Leo. You can't stay here. The blight, it masks scent, but it's not safe. Nothing lives here." "I'm not living," I said flatly. "I'm surviving, and this seems like the perfect place for it." I took a step toward him, and he, a trained enforcer, took an unconscious step back. The power in me purred at the reaction. "Tell Jack I'm dead. You saw my body. The bond severing killed me. It's what he expected, isn't it?" He'd demand proof. "Then tell him the blighted earth claimed me. Tell him you saw me fall into a sinkhole. Tell him whatever you need to tell him to walk away, Leo." I met his eyes, pouring every ounce of my desperation and newfound, frightening resolve into my gaze. "For the kindness you once showed me, for the shame I know you feel, walk away." The silence in the hollow was absolute. I could hear the distant, wrong sound of the wind through the dead trees outside. Leo's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He looked at my hands, then at my face, and finally at the ground. "If you are seen, if any hint of you reaches the pack." "I am a ghost," I promised. He gave one sharp, pained nod. "There is a stream 1/2 mile north. The water is bitter but clean. Nothing hunts here, but be careful of the ground. It's unstable." He turned to leave, then paused. "The alliance with Nightfall. The ceremony is in 3 days' time." He didn't look back. He simply melted into the shadows of the woods, leaving me alone with the echoing truth. 3 days. Jack would take a new mate in 3 days. The finality of it was a different kind of blow, one the strange power couldn't deflect. I sank to the cold stone floor, the adrenaline bleeding away. The next hours were a blur of grim survival. I found the stream, drinking until my stomach cramped. I returned to the hollow, which felt less like a tomb and more like a womb, a dark, secret place where something new had been born. Me, this power. As night fell, true darkness engulfed the blighted woods. No moon or starlight seemed to penetrate the skeletal canopy. And in that darkness, I began to experiment. It started with need. I was shivering, cold to my marrow. I thought of warmth, of the fire in the den's hearth that Jack had let die. A spark of gold flickered in my palm. I cupped my hands, focusing not on my anger or pain, but on the simple, pure memory of heat. The glow grew, solidifying into a small, hovering orb of gentle warmth. It didn't burn. It radiated a comforting, golden heat that chased the chill from my skin. I stared at it, tears of sheer bewilderment tracking through the dirt on my face. When I released my focus, it winked out. But I could feel it, a reservoir inside me. Not my wolf. That connection felt muted, distant, as if my animal half was in shock. This was something else. The next day, hunger became a sharp knife in my gut. I stared at a twisted, dead root at the edge of the stream, my mind empty of everything except the need for sustenance. The golden light leaked from my fingers and brushed the root. I didn't will it to do anything. But before my eyes, the brittle, blackened root shuddered. A single, tremulous green shoot pushed out from its side, unfurling a pale, perfect leaf. It was a spot of vibrant life in a sea of death. I snatched my hand back, the light vanishing. The shoot remained. I touched it. It was real. I had not just manipulated energy or created light. I had encouraged life. What was I? The question haunted me. Werewolves had strength, speed, heightened senses. Alphas had a commanding presence. Omegas had a soothing aura. This was none of that. This was ancient. On the second day, I heard the howls. They were far off at the very edge of the blighted woods, but they were pack howls. Not hunting patterns. Celebration. The notes carried through the dead air, a raucous, joyful chorus. My heart turned to stone in my chest. The Alliance celebration had begun. Tonight, Jack would stand before the packs with Liana. Tonight, he would finalize my replacement. A dark, oily feeling rose in me, and the golden light in my core recoiled. Instead, a different impulse took hold. I thought of the celebration, of the laughter of Jack's face. I thought of him smiling at her. My hands, clenched into fists, began to ache. I looked down. A wisp of something dark, like smoke shot through with the same gold, curled around my knuckles. It felt cold. It felt like negation. Frightened, I shook my hands, dispersing it. I focused on the tiny green shoot by the stream until the calm, golden warmth returned. I had to control this. I had to understand. The celebration howls faded with the setting sun. Silence, heavier than before, settled over the woods. I sat in the mouth of my hollow, watching the impossible shoot gleam in the twilight. I was nobody's Omega now. I was a woman with a secret, sitting on dead land. A crack of a twig, too close, shattered the quiet. I scrambled back into the shadows, my heart hammering. It wasn't Leo. His step was heavier. This was stealthy. A figure appeared between the trees, not a wolf but in human form. Slender, moving with a predator's grace. As he stepped into a patch of faint light, my breath caught. Francis. He was alone, his sharp features etched with a look of intense, focused curiosity. He sniffed the air, his nose wrinkling at the blight, but his eyes were fixed on the general area of my hollow. He shouldn't have been able to track me here. The blight masked scent. Unless he hadn't tracked my scent at all. He stopped 20 feet away, his voice a smooth, venomous ribbon in the dark. "Little Omega, are you in there? I have to say I'm impressed. Leo's report was so tragically vague. A sinkhole. How convenient. I pressed myself against the cold stone. Come now, he crooned, taking a step closer. I know you're not dead. A bond severing that doesn't kill its omega. That's not a tragedy, Ellie, that's a miracle. Or, his voice dropped, laced with greedy intrigue, a power. My brother, in his grief over his poor, lost mate, might not think to question things. But I'm not so sentimental. An anomaly in my pack's territory is a threat, or an opportunity. He was close enough now that I could see the cruel smile on his face. He knew, he suspected. Think of it, he whispered, almost to himself. What could an alpha do with a mate who possesses an unknown strength? An alliance with nightfall is good. But inherent power, that's legacy. Revulsion choked me. He saw me not as a person, but as a tool to be captured and used. I can smell your fear, he said, his smile widening. And something else, something sweet and strange, like sunlight on fresh soil. You will come with me, quietly, or I will make your death far less merciful than what Jack offered. He took the final steps, looming in the entrance of my hollow. His eyes gleamed in the dark. This was it. He would drag me back, a prize for his ambition. The terror crested, and with it that dark, oily feeling surged. It mixed with the gold, a tempest of betrayal, abandonment, and fury. I didn't try to shape it. I just let it scream out of me. I raised my hands. This time, it wasn't a gentle glow. A torrent of gold and black energy erupted from my palms, not as light, but as force. It hit Francis square in the chest. He didn't cry out. He was lifted off his feet and thrown backward through the air as if by a giant's hand. He crashed into the trunk of a dead oak with a sickening crunch, slumping to the ground, motionless. The energy vanished. The woods were silent again. Trembling violently, I stared at my hands, then at Francis's still form. Was he dead? I hadn't meant to, I didn't know I could. A low, pained groan answered me. He stirred, pushing himself up on one arm. His face, when he turned it toward me, was a mask of blood and utter, rapturous awe. Beautiful, he rasped, coughing. More than I dreamed. He tried to rise, but his leg buckled. Broken. But his eyes never left me, burning with possession. I had revealed myself, and I had made an enemy who now knew exactly what I was worth. I turned and ran deeper into the blighted woods, the sound of his low, chasing laughter following me into the dark. The echo of Francis's vow chased me through the skeletal trees. I will have you. His voice, a blend of awe and greed, was a poison in my veins. I ran until my lungs screamed, the golden light that had erupted from my palms now a faint, terrified shimmer under my skin. He knew. He had seen it. I was no longer just a problem to be erased. I was a thing to be captured and used. I didn't stop until the acidic burn in my muscles forced me to stumble against a granite outcrop, heaving for air. The blighted woods were silent around me, a dead audience to my panic. I clutched my stomach, a new, sharper fear cutting through the rest. The pup. In the violent surge of power I'd forgotten. Had I heard it? A desperate, quiet sob escaped me. I pressed my hands low, whispering useless apologies into the cold air. A faint, warm pulse answered from within my core, not the wild power, but something quieter, steadier. Life. It was still there. The relief was so profound my knees buckled. But the warmth sparked a memory. The golden light, the way it had responded to my need for warmth, for growth. Hesitantly, I cupped my hands over my abdomen. I didn't command the power, I pleaded with it. Please, keep it safe. I focused on the image of a protective cocoon, a shield of gentle warmth. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, a soft, gold-tinged glow emanated from my palms, seeping through my tattered dress and into my skin. It wasn't a blast or a burst. It was a slow, deliberate seepage, like sunlight through leaves. A profound sense of calm settled over my middle, a feeling of fortified safety. The power had understood. The realization left me trembling. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an extension of my will, my need. But Francis had seen the weapon, and he would come hunting. I couldn't stay near the hollow. He knew that location. I needed to move deeper into the blight to find a place even the pack's hunters would fear to tread. The unstable ground Leo had warned me about. It was my only advantage. I traveled by night, guided by the weak moonlight filtering through the barren branches. My body, though still aching from the severance and the flight, felt stronger than it should have. The rabbit I'd consumed, transformed by that first burst of power, had nourished me in a way simple meat never had. I found the bitter stream again and drank, the clean water a minor blessing. On the second night, I found the cracks. The earth here was different, not just dead, but broken. Deep, jagged fissures split the ground, exhaling a faint, warm, metallic scent. Sulfur and something else, something old and deep. The hair on my arms stood up. This was the instability Leo meant. One wrong step, and the ground might give way to whatever lay beneath this cursed place. Skirting the largest fissures, I discovered a new shelter. Not a cave, but the massive, hollow husk of a petrified tree, its interior blackened by some ancient fire. The opening was narrow, hidden by a curtain of brittle, thorny vines. It was cramped and smelled of ash, but it was concealed. I crawled inside, pulling the... Here I practiced. With grim determination, I focused on the power. I needed control. I couldn't afford another blinding explosion that would beacon my location. Sitting in the dark, I held out my palm. Light, I thought. A tiny candle flame flicker of gold sputtered to life above my skin. It wavered, then steadied. The relief... I tried to summon the growth, the force that had made the moss and berries. Focusing on a handful of blighted soil I'd scooped inside, I willed it to change. The gold flickered, but nothing happened. My frustration mounted, and the light sputtered out. I took a shaking breath. It was tied to my emotions, but not in a simple way. The growth had come from a need to nurture, to sustain. The violent blast had come from primal fear and rage. I thought of my pup, of the need to provide, to create a safe place. I placed my hand back on the soil, pushing aside my fear of Francis, my heartbreak over Jack. I thought only of the life inside me and the necessity of life around me. A slow, warm trickle of energy left my fingertips. The gray soil darkened. A single, brave green shoot, not moss this time, but a blade of wild grass, pushed upward, unfurling in the dead air of my tree trunk home. Tears welled in my eyes. This was my truth. Not a weapon first, but a source of life. A power an Omega was never supposed to have. The sound of howls on the third night was different. They weren't the raucous celebration howls from before. These were methodical, sweeping calls, hunting patterns. My blood went cold. They were searching a grid. Francis, I stayed perfectly still in my husk, barely breathing. The howls came from the east, then the south, never quite reaching my fissured ground. They feared this place. But how long would that fear hold Francis back? As dawn bleached the sky, a new sound replaced the fading howls. The crunch of footsteps on deadfall. Close. Not the careful patrol of enforcers, but a single, arrogant stride. I knew that. Through a crack in the petrified wood, I saw him. Francis stood at the edge of the fissured zone, his nose lifted, sampling the air. His left arm was bound in a sling made from torn fabric, his face marred by an angry, freshly scabbed burn across his cheek, the marks of my power. A thrill of savage satisfaction shot through me, followed immediately by dread. He didn't venture into the cracked earth. Instead, he smiled, a cold, knowing thing. "I can smell your fear, little Omega," he called out, his voice cutting through the still morning. "And something else. That sweet, potent scent of your gift. It lingers. You can't hide it from me." I clamped a hand over my mouth, silencing my own breath. Jack is busy, Francis continued, pacing along the perimeter like a wolf at a fence. Preparing for his union with Liana. He believes you're a pile of bones in a ditch, thanks to that traitorous beta. But we know the truth, don't we? He stopped, turning directly toward my general hiding place. What you are is too valuable to waste. You belong to the pack, to its future. He took one deliberate step onto the unstable ground. A small shower of pebbles skittered into a nearby fissure. Imagine it, Ellie. You won't be a cast-off. You'll be a treasure. My secret. With that power, I could force life into the most barren parts of our territory. We could become self-sufficient, untouchable. Or, his voice dropped, laced with menace, imagine that power focused. A touch, a breath that blights their water. My stomach churned. He saw every horrific possibility. Come out now, he commanded, his alpha air voice brooking no argument. I will be a kinder master than the woods. Your pup will live. It will have a place. Refuse me. He let the threat hang, his gaze scanning the dead trees. I will have the enforcers collapse every hollow and cave until we find you. And I will take the pup from your corpse and raise it as my own weapon. The threat to my child was a trigger sharper than any fear for myself. The golden power surged in my core, hot and ready. I fought it down, my nails biting into my palm. An explosion would give me away completely. I needed a different plan. He took another step, and a larger chunk of earth near his foot crumbled away. He jumped back, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He was afraid of the ground. An idea, desperate and dangerous, formed. I couldn't fight him head-on, but the land itself might. Gathering my will, I focused not on him, but on the ground beneath his feet. I poured my fear, my rage, my need to protect my child into a single, silent command directed at the deep, cracked earth. Break. For a moment, nothing. Then, a deep, groaning rumble vibrated through the husk of my tree. Francis's eyes went wide. The network of fissures around him suddenly glowed with a faint, sickly yellow light, not my gold, but something infernal from the earth's depth. With a sound like a giant's bones snapping, the section of crust where he stood gave way. Francis let out a shout of alarm as he plummeted, not into a bottomless pit, but into a shallow, steaming crevice about 10 feet down. I heard a pained grunt as he landed. Cautiously, I peered out. He was trapped in a rocky sinkhole, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. He looked up, his face contorted in pain and fury, meeting my eyes through the gap in the petrified wood. "You bitch," he snarled, struggling to rise. "You'll pay for this." But he was stuck. For now, I had no delusions it would hold him for long. He would heal and he would climb out. It was time to go. Now, I slipped from my shelter, keeping low. I had to get farther away, beyond even this. As I moved past the crevice, his voice, strained but venomous, followed me. "Run, Ellie. Run as far as you can. There is no pack that will take in a severed, pregnant Omega. No territory that isn't claimed. You will starve, or you will be caught by worse than me. And when you are, I will be there to collect what's mine." I didn't look back. I ran north, his curses echoing behind me. His words, however, planted a seed of despair. He was right. The werewolf world was a map of strict borders and stricter loyalties. A lone Omega was prey. A pregnant, severed one with a mysterious power. I was a walking curse. For days, I traveled, a ghost in the blight. My power provided scant berries and purified water, but the landscape grew even more desolate. The dead woods eventually gave way to a vast, frozen marsh, the air sharp with cold. This was no longer blood moon territory. The cold seeped into my bones. My dress was in tatters, my feet raw. The protective warmth around my pup was a constant drain, a tiny, steady leak of my energy. I was weakening. Francis's prophecy of starvation on the edge of the frozen marsh, under a sky-threatening snow, I finally collapsed against the trunk of a frost-rimed willow. This was it. I had run myself to ground. I had no strength to go on, no plan, no hope. I closed my eyes, ready to let the cold take me and my child. At least we would be together. At least we would be free. A new scent hit my nose, cutting through the marsh rot and my own despair. Wood smoke and meat cooking. My eyes flew open. I dragged myself up, peering through the skeletal willow branches. In the distance, on a rise overlooking the marsh, was a wall. Rough-hewn timber, sharpened at the top. And beyond it, the peaked roofs of lodges. A settlement. But whose? It wasn't the sleek, aggressive architecture of the Blood Moon Den. This looked older, wilder. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the terrible choice. The certain death of the wild, or the potential death, or worse, of unknown hands. The smell of food made my stomach cramp violently. The pup stirred. A weak fluff. Gathering the last dregs of my strength, I made my decision. I would not let my child die without trying. I would beg for scraps for a single night by a fire. If they killed me, so be it. But maybe, just maybe. I stumbled toward the wall, each step a monumental effort. As I neared the closed gate, I saw symbols carved into the timber, a stylized wolf's head, but with a crescent moon between its eyes. A pack sigil I raised a trembling hand to knock, the sound pitifully faint against the heavy wood. There was no answer. With the last of my will, I pushed against the gate. It didn't budge. Sobs of final frustration began to choke me. Then, with a groan, a small, hidden sally port within the gate swung inward. A figure stood silhouetted against the warm firelight of the compound. He was enormous, taller and broader than even Jack, with a mane of silver-streaked black hair and a beard braided with leather. His eyes, a piercing Arctic blue, swept over me, taking in my torn dress, my swollen belly, my frost-bleached skin. His gaze held no immediate cruelty, only a deep, assessing shock. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My legs gave way. I pitched forward into the snow. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was those blue eyes widening, and his hand, surprisingly gentle, reaching down to catch me before my head hit the ground. The last thing I heard was his voice, a low rumble like distant thunder, speaking not to me but to others behind him. "By the moon, fetch the Alpha. Tell him we found a ghost in the snow." A ghost in the snow. The words echoed in the fading hollow of my mind as the world dissolved into a smear of gray timber and shocked, golden eyes. Then, nothing. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, the absence of the killing cold. I was wrapped in a dense, dry warmth that smelled of pine smoke and cured leather. Next, the softness beneath me, a yielding pallet of furs, not frozen earth. A low, rhythmic crackling teased my hearing. A fire. My body, so long the pup inside me shifted, a gentle nudge of life that sent a bolt of panic through my core. Where? My eyes flew open. I was in a small, circular room built of dark, fitted timber. A central fire pit glowed with embers, the source of the heat, and the gentle light that danced on walls hung with simple woven tapestries. The air was still and close, a shelter. A prison. I tried to sit up, and a wave of dizziness forced me back down with a weak gasp. The sound brought movement. A shadow detached itself from a stool by the door, resolving into the enormous, silver-streaked warrior. He was even larger indoors, his shoulders nearly brushing the frame. He moved with a predator's quiet grace, kneeling a few feet from my pallet to bring himself to my level. His gaze was no longer shocked, but deeply assessing, tracing the gaunt lines of my face, the prominent swell of my belly beneath the strange woolen blanket. "You are awake," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like stones shifting deep in the earth. It held no immediate threat, but no warmth either. a statement of fact. I could only stare, my throat sealed shut by fear and a lifetime of omega conditioning. I was in an alpha's space. The energy of this place hummed with it, a different flavor than Jack's, less sharp but no less potent. Speaking unbidden could be a transgression. My hands crept protectively over my stomach. He seemed to understand my silence. You collapsed at our south gate, half frozen, starving. His eyes flicked to my midsection again. And with pup, my alpha has been notified. Alpha, the word was a spike of ice in my newfound warmth. Every alpha I had known had brought me pain. Jack with his betrayal, Francis with his cruelty. What would this one do with a severed, pregnant omega from a rival pack, dumped on his doorstep like cursed goods? Francis's last curse echoed. No pack will shelter you. My name is Ellie, I whispered, the words scraping raw. It was a risk, but being a nameless ghost felt more dangerous. I needed to be a person, however broken. The guard inclined his head slightly. Kale, sentinel of the Moonshadow pack. Moonshadow, the sigil on his leathers, the wolf head with the crescent moon. It meant nothing to me. We were beyond Blood Moon territory, beyond the marsh. In a land, before I could muster another question, the energy in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, but a pressure change, a subtle reordering of the air. Kale rose smoothly to his feet and stepped back, bowing his head. The door opened. The man who entered was not what I expected. He was older, his dark hair heavily threaded with silver, his face lined not with softness, but with the weathered patience of a cliff face. He was tall, though not as massive as Kale, and he wore his authority like a well-fitted cloak, quiet and absolute. His eyes, a calm, steady gray, found me instantly. They held a depth of seeing that made me want to shrink into the furs. This was the Alpha. He studied me for a long, silent moment. I saw his gaze take in everything: my borrowed clothes, my malnourished frame, the mating scar on my neck that was now a pale, severed ruin. His nostrils flared slightly, scenting the air. He would smell the blight on me, the lingering taint of blood moon, the emptiness where a bond should be, and beneath it all, the strange, green life scent of my power, dormant now but unmistakable. "Leave us, Kale," the Alpha said, his voice quiet. Kale bowed and slipped out, closing the door. I was alone with him. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird. I struggled again to sit up, needing to not be so vulnerable before him. This time, the dizziness receded enough for me to prop myself on my elbows. He did not approach. He simply pulled a three-legged stool near the fire and sat, the distance between us respectful, intentional. "I am Arlen," he said. "Alpha of Moonshadow, you are in our healer's lodge." He paused. "Kale called you a ghost. I see why. The blighted lands to the south are a graveyard. Nothing comes out of them alive." I found my voice thin and reedy. I had nowhere else to go. "The pup?" he asked, his tone neutral. "Alive for now," he nodded slowly. "You bear a severed mating bond to an alpha. The scent is faded but potent, blood moon." It wasn't a question. I could only confirm it with a tight jerk of my head, shame heating my cheeks. An omega cast off was a failure, a disgrace. "An alpha who severs a pregnant mate condemns her twice over," Arlen stated, and there was a flicker of something hard in his gray eyes. It wasn't pity. It was condemnation of Jack. "It is a practice my pack does not follow. It is a waste of life and of strength." The words were so foreign, so antithetical to everything I had known, that I couldn't process them. I just stared. "Your power," he continued, and my blood went cold. "The land where you fell. The snow was melted in a perfect circle around you. Dead grass beneath had put out green shoots. I had been too exhausted to control it. In my desperation, my final prayer for life, it had leaked out of me, a silent announcement of my abnormality. I closed my eyes, waiting for the demand, the greed, the same look Francis had worn. "You cannot control it," he observed. "I'm learning," I whispered defensively, my eyes snapping open. It responds to need, and to destroy," he said. "The earth is wounded where you called upon it. It is a hungry power. It takes as much as it gives." He saw too much. "I didn't mean to. I did not say you did," he interrupted, his voice still calm. "I am stating a fact. A tool is neither good nor evil. It is the hand that wields it and the need that drives the hand." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees. "Why did your alpha sever you, Ellie? The truth." The direct question, spoken with such unwavering authority, broke something open inside me. It wasn't the whole truth. I couldn't speak of Francis's plot, not yet, but a fragment of it tumbled out. "I was barren for 3 years. He needed an heir. His brother advocated for a new alliance with the Nightfall Pack. Their alpha's daughter is fertile." Arlen's expression remained impassive, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. "So he traded you for political advantage and a fresh womb. And when he discovered the pup, he believed it wasn't his," I said, the old, familiar ache twisting inside. "He believed I had betrayed him. The severing was his judgment." A long silence stretched, filled only by the pop of the embers. Arlen looked into the fire, his thoughts inscrutable. "The blight is a place of death. It rejects life. Yet you survived there for days. You nurtured life within it. That is not the work of a barren omega, or a weak one." He stood up and I flinched. He noted it, a slight frown touching his lips, but he didn't comment. "You will remain here. Rest. Our healer, Mara, will see to you and your pup. You are not a prisoner, Ellie of Bloodmoon, but you are not free to roam. The safety of my pack is my first concern. Your presence and your power are unknown variables." It was more than I had dared hope for. Shelter. A healer. Not immediate death or captivity. Tears, hot and sudden, blurred my vision. I blinked them back furiously, showing weakness to another alpha felt deadly. "Thank you," I managed to choke out. He moved to the door, then paused. "You are a ghost no longer. You have a name and a life within you. In Moonshadow, that carries weight. Do not make me regret the burden." With that, he left, and the room felt both emptier and safer. The healer, Mara, arrived soon after. She was a beta woman with kind eyes and capable hands, her scent all soothing herbs and clean water. She brought broth, which I drank greedily, and she examined me with a clinical gentleness that held no judgment. She clucked over my malnutrition, the bruises, the state of my feet. "The pup is strong," she murmured, her hands resting on my belly. "A fighter like its mother, but you must eat, sleep. Let your body remember what it is to be safe so it can heal." Safe, the concept was so alien it felt like a trick. But as the hours bled into a day, then too, in the quiet lodge with Mara's intermittent care, a fragile shell of safety began to form around me. I slept deeply, dreamlessly for the first time since the den. I ate what I was given. The pup grew more active, its kicks a constant, reassuring reminder of my purpose. And my power, that restless green energy, slept too. It was a quiet hum in my veins, sated by the warmth and sustenance. On the third morning, the illusion shattered. I was sitting by the fire, a fur around my shoulders, when the wind shifted. It blew from the south, carrying a familiar, hated scent through the high, narrow window. Blood moon. And not just any blood moon. Francis. My body went rigid, the broth in my wooden bowl threatening to come back up. He was close. He had tracked me. Of course he had. My escape through the fissures had only delayed him. Panic, sharp and acrid, shot through me. It woke the power. A tiny, frantic spark of it leapt from my fingertip to the earth floor. And a single, defiant blade of grass sprouted between the packed dirt and the hearthstone. Before I could react, the door opened. It was Cale, his expression grim. "The Alpha requires you at the south gate," he said. "There are visitors claiming a pack fugitive." My heart plummeted. Arlen had offered sanctuary, but would he risk a pack conflict for a stranger? For a ghost he'd only just named. Trembling, I followed Kale through the settlement. Moonshadow was a place of orderly, sturdy lodges and quiet, watchful people. They stopped to stare as I passed, their sense a mix of curiosity and wariness. I kept my eyes on Kale's broad back, my hands clamped over my belly. The south gate was an imposing structure of timber and iron, set into a high palisade wall. Arlen stood before it, flanked by several senior warriors, including Kale, who took his place beside him. Beyond the open gate, on the barren slope that led down to the frozen marsh, stood a contingent of blood moon, and at their head, one arm in a sling, his face a mask of cold fury and triumphant malice, was Francis. Our eyes met across the distance. A vicious smile split his lips. He looked from me to Arlen, and his voice, slick with false diplomacy, carried on the wind. "Alpha Arlen, thank you for detaining our wayward Omega. She is a criminal guilty of treason and attempted assassination of her Alpha. She is to be returned to Bloodmoon for execution." Lies, all lies. I looked desperately at Arlen. He stood impassive, his gaze on Francis. "She carries a pup," Francis waved his good hand dismissively. "A bastard, sired by a traitor, of no consequence. Her power, however, is pack property. She stole it. We are here to reclaim what..." So that was his play, not just me, but my power to own it. Arlen was silent for a long, tense moment. He glanced back at me, his gray eyes seeing my terror, my silent plea. He looked at my hands, pressed to the life in my womb. Then he turned back to Francis. "You speak of property and theft," Arlen said, his tone deceptively mild. "I see a severed, pregnant female who sought sanctuary. I smell no guilt of assassination on her, only fear." He took a single step forward, his authority swelling like a silent wave. "Moonshadow law is clear. Sanctuary, once given informally, must be formally petitioned against. You have no treaty with us, Blood Moon heir. You have..." Francis's smile vanished. "You would shield this abomination over a pack alliance." "I shield a life under my roof," Arlen corrected, his voice hardening. "The life within her is innocent of your politics. You will turn your warriors and leave my territory." The air crackled with tension. Francis's eyes burned with pure, unadulterated hatred, for me, for Arlen, for his defiance. His warriors shifted, hands near weapons. Moonshadow's guards, including Kale, Francis knew he was outmatched, here and now. His injury, his smaller force, the disadvantage of being on another Alpha's doorstep, it all worked against him. He spat on the ground, his gaze locking with mine, promising endless torment. "This isn't over, Ellie," he snarled, the words meant for me alone. "You belong to Bloodmoon. I will be..." With a final, seething glare at Arlen, he turned and barked an order. The Bloodmoon warriors retreated, fading back into the bleak landscape of the marsh. My knees buckled. Kale's hand was suddenly under my elbow, steadying me. I was shaking all over. Arlen turned to me. The sternness was still there, but beneath it I saw a flicker of something else. Resolve. "You see the burden," he said quietly. "I have just declared you under Moonshadow's protection. To revoke it now would be a sign of fatal weakness. You have made my pack a target." "I'm sorry," I breathed, horrified. "I didn't mean to." "No," he cut me off. "You meant to survive, that I understand. But survival now has a price for you and for us." He looked toward the gate where Francis had disappeared. "He will return, not with a handful of warriors. He will go back to your former Alpha. He will spin his tail. And he will return with the full force of the Blood Moon pack, demanding I hand over their property. The full force? Jack would come here. For me. Not to take me back, but to erase the embarrassment, to fulfill his brother's scheme, to finally finish what he started. The thought was a cold knife in my soul. Arlen's gaze returned to me, heavy and intent. You have 3 days. The healer says your body is stable enough. In 3 days, we must know what you are, Ellie. Not a ghost, not a fugitive. We must know the truth of your power, and you must learn to wield it as more than a reflex. Because when they come to that gate, he said, nodding toward the south, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper, you will not be hiding behind my warriors. You will be standing beside them. He left me then, standing cold and exposed just inside the gate, with Kale's silent presence at my back and the terrifying, impossible weight of an entire pack's future settling onto my broken shoulders. The sanctuary had become a battlefield, and I was the weapon they needed me to become. The ghost had to learn how to be a storm. 3 days. The number echoed in my skull, a frantic drumbeat against the fragile peace of the healer's lodge. Sanctuary was a shield, but Arlen had made it clear. It was a shield I now had to help hold. If I failed, the Moonshadow pack would be bathed in blood because of me. Mara changed my bandages with efficient kindness, her fingers gentle on the fading bruises. The pup is strong, she murmured, a constant, soothing refrain. Your body is healing well. But her eyes, when she thought I wasn't looking, held a shadow. The shadow of I spent the first day in a haze of dread, jumping at every sound from the settlement beyond the lodge walls. The warmth of the fire, the soft furs, the nourishing broth, they felt like a beautiful dream I was about to be ripped from. My power lay dormant, a quiet, wary pool in my center. I was afraid to call it. What if I couldn't control it? What if I burned this lodge down around us? Kale stood guard outside my door, a silent, imposing presence. Occasionally, he would bring word from Arlen. The sentries are doubled. The palisade is being reinforced. Each report was a stone added to the weight. On the morning of the second day, the fear crystallized into a sharp, painful resolve. I couldn't just lie here waiting. Arlen had given me a task. Master your power. I had to try. I waited until Mara had finished her morning check. I need to practice, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Somewhere contained, where I can't hurt anyone. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. There's an old storage cellar behind the lodge. It's stone, mostly empty. Kale can take you. The cellar was cold and smelled of earth and old roots. A single shaft of light from a high, grated window cut through the dust. Kale remained at the top of the stairs, a dark silhouette. I will be here. Do not exhaust yourself. Alone in the dimness, I hugged my arms around myself, feeling the small, firm swell of my belly. For you, I whispered. And for them, they took us in. I closed my eyes and reached for the pool of warmth inside. It stirred sluggishly, as if sleeping. I thought of the first time it had sparked desperate need for warmth. I focused on that feeling, but not the desperation. Just the concept of light. A gentle, guiding light, like the moon through clouds. A soft, silver glow kindled in my palm. It was no bigger than a coin, cool and steady. My breath caught. Control. Deliberate, gentle control. I willed it brighter, and it complied, washing the stone walls in a pale luminescence. It didn't burn, didn't rage. It just was. Tears of relief pricked my eyes. I could nurture this. I could make it grow. Next, I thought of protection, of a barrier. I pictured a wall of shimmering air, like heat haze. I pushed the feeling outward from my core. The air before me wavered, and a faint, transparent shimmer solidified for just a second before winking out. A headache spiked behind my eyes. Defensive shaping was harder, more costly. I practiced until my legs trembled and the headache threatened to split my skull. The light I could sustain. The shield was fleeting, but it was a start. As I trudged back up the stairs, Kale offered a hand to steady me. He didn't speak, but his grip was firm. "Thank you," I breathed. That afternoon, Arlen came. He didn't enter the lodge, but stood at the doorway, his silver-streaked frame filling the space. He watched as I sat by the fire, slowly sipping water. "Report," he said, not unkindly. "I can make light," I said. "A small shield, but it's—" He nodded as if this was what he expected. "Light is a beginning. It is will-given form. The shield is will-given substance. Your power responds to intent. Remember that. In the chaos of a fight, your intent must be as sharp as a blade, or it will control you." His gaze was heavy. "Francis will come at dawn on the third day. He is not a patient man." The finality of it stole my breath. "Dawn," I repeated. "We will be ready. You will be placed with Mara and the other non-combatants in the long hall at the center of the settlement. It is the most defensible structure." A spark of defiance, hot and sudden, flared in my gut. "You said I must stand and fight beside your warriors." "And you will," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "By mastering your power enough to not be a vulnerability, by ensuring your pup survives. That is your battlefield for now, Ellie. Do not mistake the location of the fight." Shame heated my cheeks. He was right. My reckless courage could get everyone killed. I nodded, swallowing the protest. The second night was the longest of my life. Every creak of timber, every call of a night bird, was Francis scaling the walls. I placed a hand on my stomach, the soft glow from my palm illuminating the dark under the furs. "I'm scared," I confessed to the silent pup. "But we're not alone anymore. That has to count for something." Dawn of the third day did not arrive with peace. It arrived with a single, echoing thud that shook the very ground, followed by the blast of a war horn, deep, brutal, and utterly foreign to this quiet marsh. It was not the clean note of a Moonshadow sentry. It was the sound of a throat being ripped out. I was already awake, dressed in the simple, sturdy clothes Mara had provided. I shot upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. The horn blew again, and this time it was answered by the shouts of men and the chilling, collective snarl of wolves shifting. Cale threw the lodge door open. His face was a mask of grim readiness. "To the long hall, now." Mara was already at my side, a pack of supplies in her hand. "Stay close to me." We ran into a settlement transformed. The peaceful paths were now streams of warriors, betas and deltas, running towards the southern palisade, some already in half-form, claws extended. Their faces were set, focused. I saw fear, but it was buried under layers of resolve. Children and elders were being shepherded towards the large, central long hall. Another tremendous thud hit the gate. They were using a battering ram. We were halfway to the long hall when a section of the palisade to the east of the gate exploded inward in a shower of splintered timber. Not broken through, blasted. Through the smoke and debris, a figure stalked, shaking off shards of wood. Francis. He was in full warrior form, larger and more brutal than I remembered, his dark pelt streaked with ash, his eyes burning with amber fury. He wasn't alone. A dozen Blood Moon warriors poured through the breach behind him, meeting the first line of Moonshadow defenders in a crash of fang and claw. He found a weak point in the wall, Cale snarled, shoving Mara and me behind him. "Go!" But Francis's gaze swept the chaos and locked onto me. He pointed a clawed finger. "The Omega! She is mine! Kill anyone who shields her!" A knot of Blood Moon warriors broke from the main fray, charging straight for us. Cale met them with a roar, his shift rippling over him in an instant. He became a massive, gray-streaked wolf, intercepting the first two with devastating force. Mara pulled me, but we were cut off. A beta, his muzzle already bloody, lunged at us. My body moved before my mind could think. The fear wasn't a cloud, it was a spear. My hand shot out, not with light, but with a concentrated pulse of pure, repelling force. It wasn't a shield. It was a shove. The beta was thrown backward as if hit by a falling tree, skidding across the hard ground. He didn't get up. Mara stared at me, stunned. I stared at my own hand, trembling. "The long haul," Cale barked, between tearing out a foe's throat and blocking another's swipe. "Move!" We ran, stumbling over the roots of chaos. The sounds of battle were everywhere, snarls, screams, the crack of bone. The sweet, coppery scent of blood began to stain the air. We burst through the doors of the long hall, where maybe 50 frightened faces turned towards us. Mara immediately began directing people. I turned back, unable to look away from the fray. Through the open doorway, I saw the south gate finally buckle under the relentless assault. It crashed inward, and a flood of blood moon warriors poured through. At their head, moving with a calm, terrible authority, was a wolf I would have known in any form. Jack. His pelt was the color of midnight, his size dwarfing even Francis. He moved through the battle not with Francis's rage, but with a chilling, efficient precision. He didn't snarl, he simply killed. A Moonshadow warrior lunged at him. Jack sidestepped, clamped his jaws on the warrior's neck, and shook once. He lifted his head, his muzzle dark with blood. His amber eyes scanned the settlement, passing over the fighting, over Francis, who was now dueling Cale near the breached wall, and finally coming to rest on the long hall. On me, standing in the doorway. There was no recognition in that gaze, no regret, no heat. There was only the cold assessment of an alpha looking at a piece of contested property, a problem to be retrieved and disposed of. He took a step towards the long hall. A silver blur intercepted him. Arlen in his wolf form, magnificent, powerful, but older. He met Jack with a crash that echoed over the din of battle. The two alphas became a whirlwind of fur and fury, their fight carving a destructive... I was frozen, watching the mate who had condemned me to die fight the alpha who had offered me shelter. My power churned inside me, a storm of fear, grief, and a desperate, rising anger. A hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back into the long hall. It was Mara. "Bar the doors," she shouted, as the heavy timber bar was slid into place, plunging us into semi-darkness broken only by the fire in the central hearth. The last thing I saw was Francis. He had broken away from Cale, taking a glancing blow that spilled blood across his shoulder. He didn't seem to feel it. He was looking straight at the long hall, a terrifying, triumphant grin stretching his wolfish maw. He knew I was in here, trapped. The walls of the long hall, which had felt so solid moments before, now felt like a tomb. The sounds of battle were muffled but relentless. We could hear the roars, the impacts, the occasional dying cry. Minutes stretched like hours. Then a new sound. A scraping, heavy thud against the outside of the long hall wall. Then another. "They're scaling it," an old warrior near the door whispered, his knife held tight. "They're coming over." Panic surged through the crowded room. Children whimpered. My own fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it the anger solidified. Francis wanted my power. Jack wanted my corpse. They would tear this place apart, kill these people who had shown me kindness to get to me. I looked at Mara, at the terrified children huddled around their mothers, at the elders clutching makeshift weapons. My hand went to my belly. This is my battlefield. I walked away from the door, towards the center of the room, near the hearth. I closed my eyes. I didn't reach for light. I didn't reach for a shield. I reached for the root of the power itself, the wellspring of life that had made a dead seed sprout. I thought of protection, not as a wall, but as a claim. This place was sanctuary. It was under my protection. My intent focused to a single, white-hot point. Nothing that means us harm shall take root here. I pushed that intent outward, threw my feet into the packed earth floor, threw my hands into the air. A ripple went through the long hall. Not a sound, but a vibration. The very stones in the hearth seemed to hum. Outside, near the roof, there was a sudden startled yelp of pain, followed by a heavy crash. Then another. "The vines!" Someone by a high window cried out. "The old ivy on the walls, it's moving. It's pulling them down." I kept my eyes closed, pouring that nurturing, defensive will into the settlement itself. I felt a dizzying drain, a pull so deep it threatened to empty me. I saw, in my mind's eye, not with sight but with sense, the tough, ancient ivy that clung to the timber walls suddenly thickening, lashing like green whips, tangling around the limbs and throats of the Blood Moon warriors trying to scale them. I felt the very earth at the base of the palisade shift, tripping charging wolves. I was not fighting them. I was making the territory itself reject them. But the drain was too much. A nosebleed started, a warm trickle down my lip. My knees buckled. "Ellie," Mara was there catching me. The connection snapped. The world rushed back in with a nauseating wave. The defensive pulse I'd sent out faded. But the damage was done. The assault on the long haul had stopped, the sounds of struggle outside now more distant, redirected. I gasped, leaning heavily on Mara. The cost was immense. Then a new sound cut through. Not a horn, but a howl. A deep, resonant, commanding howl from the center of the settlement. It was Arlen's voice in wolf song. It was not a cry of pain, but a signal. In response, from beyond the walls, from the direction of the frozen marsh, came answering howls. Dozens of them. They were not Moonshadow. They were wild, fierce, and closing fast. The door of the long hall shuddered under a new impact, but this time it was from the inside. The bar was thrown aside, and Kale stood there, bloodied but standing. His eyes found me. "Arlen has called the allies," he panted, his voice gravelly with exhaustion and awe. "The rogue packs from the deep marsh. They are here." He looked at me, his gaze dropping to the blood on my lip, seeing the weakness and the unimaginable thing I had just done. His next words sent a chill of a different kind down my spine. "But Francis has broken through the eastern flank. He's not heading for the gate. He's circling. He's coming for the back of the long hall." Kale's jaw tightened. "He's coming for you, and he's alone. He doesn't want to share your power with anyone. Not even his alpha." The thunder of battle was a distant storm. Here, in the shadowed lee of the long hall, there was only the ragged sound of my own breath and the creeping, predatory silence of his approach. Francis had found me. My power was a guttered candle inside me, the vast expenditure of holding the hall's defenses leaving only cold wax and smoke in my veins. I was backed against the rough timber wall, the scent of damp earth and my own fear thick in the air. He emerged from between two lodges, his enforcer's leathers streaked with soot and something darker. His eyes weren't on the greater battle, where Arlen's howl had been answered by savage cries from the marsh. They were fixed solely on me. "Little Omega," he crooned, stepping closer. The space between us crackled with his malice. "All this fuss. You wither my brother's bond, you make the very land your weapon, and you hide among cowards. That power doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the pack. To me." I pushed away from the wall, my legs trembling. "It belongs to my child," I said, my voice a thread of sound. "And to no one else." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Sentiment, the flaw of every weakling. I'll carve the pup from you and see what legacy it carries. After I've broken you to the harness." He lunged, not in a wolf's rush, but with calculated, brutal efficiency. I had no strength to run, no reservoir of power to summon, only instinct. I dropped, rolling sideways as his claws gouged splinters from the wall where my head had been. The movement sent a nauseating wave of dizziness through me. I scrambled on hands and knees toward the corner of the hall. A shadow fell over me. I looked up, not at Francis, but at Kale. The Moonshadow's sentinel bled from a gash on his temple, his chest heaving, but he planted himself between Francis and me, a short spear leveled. "You trespass, Blood Moon," he growled. Francis didn't break stride. "You're in my way." He shifted, the brutal snap of bone and tendon a horrifyingly fast process. A massive, brindled wolf, larger than any I'd seen, slammed into Kale. The sentinel shifted in mid-impact, a tawny wolf meeting the charge. They became a whirl of fang and fur. Kale was a seasoned warrior, but Francis was an alpha heir, driven by a vicious greed. I saw Francis's jaws clamp on Kale's shoulder, a sickening crunch. Kale yelped, his form faltering. With a powerful shake, Francis flung him aside. Kale's body hit the ground and did not rise. Francis, still in wolf form, turned his bloody muzzle toward me. His lips pulled back. This was it. No grand defense. No hidden reserve. Just me, the dirt, and the monster. But as his muscles coiled to spring, a single, clear thought cut through the terror. I will not die on my knees. I did not reach for the deep well. It was empty. Instead, I reached for the spark. The first spark I'd ever consciously summoned in the darkness of the stone hollow. The simple, defiant need for light. I pressed my hands to the cold, dead earth and willed not an explosion, not a shield, but a signal. A beacon of pure, gentle life. A soft, gold-green radiance bloomed from my palms, seeping into the ground. It did not surge. It spread, like the first dawn after a long winter, a fragile circle of luminescent moss and tiny, star-like flowers erupting from the barren soil at my feet. It was pitifully small against his rage. Beautiful and utterly. Francis froze, his predatory advance halting. His wolf's eyes, intelligent and cruel, widened not in fear, but in avarice. He saw it. The pure, unadulterated creative force, the opposite of the destructive power I'd used to break the bond and shatter the earth. This was the heart of it, and he wanted it more than he wanted my immediate. He shifted back, standing over me as a man, panting slightly. "Yes," he breathed, mesmerized. "Yes, that's it, the source." He reached for me. A roar split the air, not from the marsh, but from the heart of the settlement. A silver-streaked wolf, larger than Francis's form, barreled into him. Arlen. They crashed together in a tangle of fury. This was not the chaotic brawl with Kale. This was alpha against alpha air, a brutal symphony of power and experience. Arlen fought with a silent, focused wrath, each blow meant to disable, to kill. Francis fought like a cornered viper. All desperate, I crawled to Kale. The sentinel was breathing, a shallow rasp, his shoulder mangled. The circle of light around me faded, my last dregs spent. I pressed my hand over his wound, as if my mere touch could stem the flow, and watched the battle that would decide my fate. Arlen had the advantage of terrain and righteous fury, but Francis had the manic strength of obsession. He slipped a killing blow and raked his claws down Arlen's flank. Arlen staggered. It was the opening Francis needed. He disengaged, his eyes darting past the alpha, back to me. But he never got to take another. A new figure stood at the end of the alley, blocking the path to the main fray. He was immaculate, his alpha's armor unblemished by soot or struggle. Jack. He had not come with the crashing force of battle. He had come quietly, inevitably, like the executioner's dawn. His cold gaze swept over the scene. The wounded Arlen, the bleeding Kale, me huddled on the ground, and his brother, panting and wild-eyed. "Francis," Jack said, his voice cutting through the muffled din of war. "The flank has collapsed. The marsh wolves are driving our forces back. The alliance is forfeit. This raid is a failure." Francis spat blood. "The raid doesn't matter. She is the prize. Can't you see it? The power she holds." "I see a rogue Omega," Jack interrupted, his tone flat and final. "Contested property that has caused the loss of Blood Moon warriors and a vital alliance. The only remaining objective is denial to the enemy." He was not looking at me as a former mate, not as a person. I was a flawed asset to be liquidated. His eyes held the same detached resolve they'd had in our den when he severed the bond. Francis stared at him, a dawning, furious understanding breaking through his greed. "You fool, you blind, ambition-constrained fool. This is bigger than some mating alliance. With her, we wouldn't need alliances. Your obsession undermines the pack." For a heartbeat, brothers faced each other, the air between them crackling with a betrayal deeper than any Jack had inflicted on me. Francis had orchestrated my downfall for pack gain, but now his ambition had become personal, a rival claim to Jack's own cold authority. Francis's answer was a snarl. He shifted back to wolf form and charged. Not at me, Jack shifted in a blur of motion. His wolf was a storm-gray beast, majestic and terrible in its efficiency. They met with a crash that shook the ground. I could only watch, my arms wrapped around the life in my belly. It was a savage, silent duel. Francis fought with frenzied cunning, aiming to maim, to incapacitate. Jack fought with the cold, precise economy of a leader erasing a threat. He was not defending me. He was reasserting control. It was over quickly. Jack caught Francis's foreleg in his jaws and twisted. The bones snapped with an audible crack. As Francis stumbled, yelping in pain, Jack's next move was not a killing bite to the throat. He slammed his full weight into Francis's side, driving him toward the edge of the settlement, toward the breached section of the palisade that opened onto the blighted woods. With a final, powerful heave, Jack threw his wounded brother through the gap. Francis's form tumbled out into the dead, gray expanse of the blight. He scrambled up, limping badly, his brindled coat matted with dirt and blood. He cast one last, burning look of pure, venomous hatred, not at Jack, but at me. Before he turned and vanished into the... Jack turned back. He stood in the breach, his gray wolf form outlined against the bleak landscape. He looked at Arlen, who had shifted back to human form, clutching his side but standing firm. He looked at Cale, at me. His gaze held no triumph, no remorse, only completion. He had purged the immediate instability. The message was clear. Blood Moon was retreating, and its failed... He gave a short, sharp bark, a command that carried over the dying sounds of battle. Then he turned and melted into the blight after his brother's trail, not to rescue, but to salvage what remained of his pack from the marsh wolves' retaliation. The sudden silence in our little pocket of the settlement was deafening. The clash of battle was receding, moving back toward the Blood Moon border, pursued by the savage cries of the rogue packs. Arlen limped over, his face etched with pain but his eyes alert. "Mara!" he bellowed. The healer appeared moments later, her apron stained, her face smudged but calm. She went at Cale first, her hands already glowing with a soft, blue-tinged healing energy, a practiced, gentle power so different from my own wild magic. "The pup?" Arlen asked me, his voice low. I managed a nod, my hand splayed over my stomach. "Safe," he nodded, then looked toward the blight. "He won't be back, not for you. You are ash in his wind now." He said it not to be cruel, but to make me understand. My war with Jack was over. He had written me off the ledger. "Francis," I whispered. Arlen's jaw tightened. "He is wounded, rogue, and has failed. His own pack has cast him out. He is a danger, but a contained one. For now." Mara helped Cale to his feet, supporting him. The sentinel's eyes met mine, and he gave a faint, pained nod of acknowledgement. "Come," Arlen said, his voice gentling. "The long hall stands." They led me not back into the dark of the cellar or the healer's lodge, but to the main doors of the long hall. The vines I had animated were now dormant, thick woody ropes woven through the timber. The earth at its base was settled, but a ring of new, healthy grass, vivid green against the trampled ground, marked where my power had touched it. The doors opened. The faces inside, elders, children, the wounded, were pale with fear, but their eyes were clear. They had heard the fight. They had seen the vines rise. They looked at me, covered in dirt and exhaustion, being supported by their bleeding alpha, and a space parted for me in the center of the hall, near the hearth where a fire now crackled. This was not the cold hearth of a den I'd been exiled from. This was a shared fire, a sanctuary held and paid for. The days that followed were a blur of quiet recovery. The Moonshadow pack tended to their wounded and repaired their walls. The rogue packs from the marsh had vanished as swiftly as they came, their debt to Arlen, whatever it was, paid. The Blood Moon pack had retreated behind its borders, licking its wounds. The proposed alliance with the Nightfall pack was, as Jack had stated, I learned all this in fragments, from Mara as she checked on me and the growing life within me, from the respectful nods of pack members who brought me extra blankets or bowls of broth. I was not an omega of this pack. I was something else, a guest, a protected one, a living testament to a law they held sacred. I sat with Arlen one afternoon on a bench by the restored south gate. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. The blight was a gray smear to the north, a border that felt less like a prison wall and more like a moat I had crossed. "The power you hold," Arlen said, gazing at the distant trees. "It is of life and of the land itself. It is not a weapon, though it can be forced to be one. Francis saw a tool, Jack saw a defect, but here it is simply a truth. Your truth." "It's tied to my will," I said, understanding dawning fully. "To my intent. When I wanted to protect, it made the vines grow. When I was only afraid, it broke things. When I had nothing left but a need for light, it made flowers." He nodded. "Then let your will be for life, Ellie, for your child's life, for your own. This settlement is yours for as long as you wish it. You have earned a place at our fire, not by your power, but by the heart that wields it." Tears, warm and clean, finally came. They were not tears of grief for a bond severed, or of fear for a monster in the woods. They were tears for a coldness that was finally leaving my bones, replaced by the fragile, steadfast warmth of sanctuary. The snows melted entirely. The first true green of spring touched the Moonshadow territory when my labor began. It was not in a healer's lodge, but in the small, sun-warmed lodge Arlen had set aside for me. Mara was there, and to my surprise, several of the elder Omega women, their presence a quiet, steadfast comfort. The pain was a tempest, a vast and terrifying tide. In the eye of that storm, I felt it. Not the destructive surge, not the gentle glow, but the deep, humming core of the power within me. It was not something to be used. It simply was. A river of life, and my child and I were carried on its current. When her first cry pierced the air, it was a sound so pure it silenced the world. Mara placed her in my arms, a tiny, perfect being with a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they blinked open, held a hint of the same gold-green light I saw in my own magic. She was not a weapon. She was not a legacy. She was a promise. I named her Aurora, for the dawn that comes after the longest night. Weeks later, I stood at the edge of the Moonshadow clearing, Aurora snug against my chest in a sling. Kale, his shoulder healed to a wicked scar, stood a respectful distance away, my silent, steadfast shadow. I no longer needed a guard, not really, but his presence was a comfort, a symbol of the pack's protection that had become friendship. I looked north toward the blight. Somewhere in those dead woods, Francis was a wounded, hateful ghost. He would always be a shadow, but shadows cannot exist without light. To the west, beyond the mountains, was the territory of the Blood Moon pack. Jack would be alpha, ruling with cold efficiency. He had his pack, his order, his solitude. Our story in his ledger was here. The sun was warm on my face. The air smelled of pine and rich soil. From the settlement behind me, I could hear the sounds of life, children laughing, the chop of wood, Mara calling a greeting. I looked down at Aurora, her small hand curled around my finger, a grip of infinite trust. My hidden power had not been for revenge or for dominance. Its plan, it seemed, had been survival, then sanctuary, and now simply this, a life, our life. I turned my back on the blight and walked toward the sound of the shared fire, my daughter's heart beating in time with my own, a new song written in the light of a different dawn.